Okay, very warm welcome. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you're joining us from North America. Welcome to this Monday webinar where we're going to be talking about how best-of-breed technology enables strategic transformation of procurement. My name is James Meads. I will be your host. I am the founder of procurementsoftware.site, which is a newly launched website that gives the buyer free-to-access shortlist in less than 5 minutes of best of breed procurement technologies that fit your own individual criteria. So it's a little bit more three-dimensional than the regular solutions maps that we've all gotten used to. So that's my introduction. Let's do a quick overview of what we want to gain from today's webinar before I introduce you to our two guests that will be on the panel for this fireside chat today. So the growth of best-of-breed solutions is providing exciting new opportunities for procurement to improve transparency, drive collaboration, and become more agile. And as procurement professionals, we all, I think, recognize that our organization and our function really does need to become more agile and less technocratic. And this is heralding a new era for procurement, putting it really at the forefront of some of the biggest challenges facing organizations and which call for more cross-functional collaboration than ever before. So in this section, Pierre Laprée of Angusta and Costas Xyloyiannis, I hope I've pronounced that right, Costas, please hit me if I haven't, of HICX, can join me to face the most common questions fielded by procurement practitioners on how to unlock the full potential of best-of-breed technologies as part of a hybrid technology environment. So especially when we're comparing against using, for example, some of the legacy suites that some of you may have had experience of using in your organizations. So we're going to be covering how and why the enterprise ProcureTech landscape is changing. Then we'll move on to look at how new technologies will transform the role of procurement. And then finally, we'll dig into how the evolution of the ProcureTech landscape and the importance of innovation is really making this landscape exciting. So before we do that, let's just have a quick introduction. So Pierre, maybe you'd like to just really quickly introduce yourself and begin by telling us a little bit more about your background and what Pierre Angusta is and what problem it solves.
Okay. So thanks, James. Hi, Costas. Hi, everyone. My name is Pierre Laprée. I'm the founder and the CEO of Angusta. I created the company a few years ago, and before that, I was a practitioner. I was the right hand for the global chief procurement officer of the Adecco Group, the staffing company, and that's pretty much where I got the idea to start Angusta. So, in a nutshell, Angusta, well, we've been pioneering procurement performance management solutions. So basically, we help our clients organize their sourcing pipeline. So that is the roadmap of all initiatives that are going to be handled by the strategic sourcing team. Ensure that we have defined goals and that we measure the results of those initiatives. The two key things here are that we help the procurement managers manage the activity of their team and ensure that the initiative will progress. And more importantly, we ensure proper alignment with finance, especially when it comes to tracking performance and savings or financial contribution. So we do this in conjunction with what our clients have. We're a pure best-of-breed solution that will work very nice with the likes of Coupa, Ariba, or your e-sourcing solution of choice.
Thank you, Pierre. And Costas, over to you, the same question.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm co-founder and CEO at HICX, and I've been in the procurement space probably 20 plus years now. Our idea was more from a consulting and data challenge, where that also, I always say we're a Novartis child, because that's where the idea kind of was planted many moons ago. But today we're helping customers sort of bring all their data together, and we're focused on bringing or building supplier experience management platform. And I think some of that will maybe come out through some of the discussion points today, but ultimately it's also through conviction that, you know, we want to help customers to enable their suppliers to do their best work for them. I think we're at a point where we've done whatever we can within our four walls, and it's more about how do you optimize that experience within the supply chain outside the four walls.
Got it. And that's becoming more and more apparent, isn't it? How can we be customer of choice, and how can we make lives as easy as possible for suppliers, other than price negotiations, of course. So, Pierre, going back to you then, let's kick off with the first section of what we're going to look at today. So there has been a rapid growth in best of breed technologies for procurement. Why has this been the case, and what do you think is behind this?
I guess there are many factors there, and so being in the software world, I think that one of the most important paradigm shift is that there are a lot of things that have changed in the world of IT, and especially when you start looking at cloud computing. So since 15 to 20 years, all the tech models have evolved from behind the firewall, on-premise data center, that transition to cloud hosting platform, from big hairy Java development to no-code platforms. The world of tech has completely changed. I think that it has fostered a lot of changes, and it has led to faster innovation, to more innovation and more solution that have also, it's like a fire that has been fueled by a lot of money. And especially if you look at the VC, the venture capital world, there's been a flurry of money. There's so much money out there, and it has helped create a lot of opportunity for would-be entrepreneurs that have an idea, where it has become a lot easier to actually build software. And as a result, we've seen more niche solutions that have been addressing very specific needs, very acute pains on the market that were not properly filled or fulfilled by the suite vendors. And again, so a lot of things, it's really a multi-factor thing, but easier tech, bigger suite vendors that fail to address some of those very specific points, and a lot of money bring this in the same pot you steer. And that's why you have a lot of new best of breed solutions. And depending on who you ask, it is said that in the past 10 years, we've seen at least 1,000 new procurement and supply chain related solution popped up. I remember 7 years ago, a lot of people working at the big suite told me, yeah, the future is in the suite. So that's a very nice product you have, but you will never make it. And now I think that quite the opposite is true, and that's quite encouraging and exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly concur on that, and I make no bones about the fact that I'm a fan of best of breed solutions over the suites. And I think we come from a similar background, right? I mean, I'm a procurement practitioner by background, and you are too, Pierre. And I think you hit on a really good point there, because there are a lot more now ex-procurement professionals that are becoming sort of SaaS or startup founders in this space. Going back to one of the arguments that you made in the last point, do you think that part of that is sort of a push factor because procurement practitioners don't really find the suites particularly intuitive or easy to use, or do you think that there are other reasons that this is sort of shaping the industry now?
I guess there's a lot of truth in that, and I don't want to badmouth anyone here, but the fact is, a lot of the big suite, the incumbent, the legacy players, no one has ever been really close to what procurement is. And the result is that these things have been built by people with no real procurement experience or second-hand procurement experience. So there are brilliant pieces of technologies there, don't get me wrong. But to me, as a former practitioner, it always feels slightly disconnected from my day-to-day reality. So when you mix that with the change of paradigm we discussed a few minutes ago, it has completely changed the world. And with the tech barriers having been lowered, the cost to entry of a new player has dramatically dropped. And that's how practitioners with very smart idea, with a bit of tech acumen, they've been able to do that and to start a new venture, to create a new solution. And that's exactly where I'm coming from. And that's super exciting, because you now see more and more things that claim they are built by buyers for buyer. and that's good. That's how we'll advance procurement. So yeah, it's good. And what I believe is rather exciting there is we realize that in the past people would say you're focusing on a problem that is too narrow, and that's why the suites have thrived. But now we end up in a world where the problems are so acute, where you need depth and not breadth. It's prime time for practitioners who have an idea, and it's prime time for best of breed as a new model to emerge. And yeah, that's why the ProcureTech ecosystem is so exciting at the moment, and that's the very reason why you built your own procurement site, James. So yeah, very good.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, actually, because if we take an example from digital marketing, if you go back sort of 6-7 years ago, you would have someone that would say they're an expert for running Facebook ads. And now you've got that same person is saying, I help boutique gym owners boost their subscriptions by running Facebook ads. You know, they're really, really narrow and deep. And that's a fantastic example of that. So over to you, Costas, now, because the practitioner mindset behind these solutions has been one driver, but one of the roadblocks or one of the problems has always been that procurement data is not as good as sales or customer data in pretty much every single organization. So now that data is also sort of taking a big part and a real sort of front seat in this growth of procurement technology, what's your view on that, Costas, in terms of how best of breed solutions are able to take on that challenge within procurement?
Yeah, well, good parallel to the customer side. Now, one thing, to maybe, it's a bit an excuse, but to justify the procurement folks, supplier data is far more complex than customer data. If you think about it, particularly in B2B, very few people actually in an organization touch a customer. But if you think who touches a supplier, absolutely everyone, right? From the CEO to someone in the production facility to the marketing function, right? So that's also the difference why you're having a lot of depth and as Pierre says, acute needs coming up. So if you think of all the different workflows, there's tons of workflows when it comes to suppliers, and we have per Angusta, HICX, we're both kind of best of breed providers, but we do have some common things, and that is obviously the supplier, right? And when I think of the subject of the supplier, of course I think of data, because that's how we represent the supplier within our systems. And you do need this kind of data foundation in order for a best of breed ecosystem to work. And I also think the fact that practitioners are driving a lot of these new startups, the same way as we kind of came about, you have felt the pain of data, right? I don't think there's anyone within procurement who you talk to where they don't complain about their supplier data and the information and the challenge around it. So it definitely is come top of mind. Now, what most people, though, think in the back of their heads is, well, sure, this is all great, but what about the integration side of things, right? Because I think that's why people gravitated initially towards a suite. You'll hear about data, and then the second kind of biggest issue you're going to hear complaints about is how the solutions didn't integrate well and how painful it was to integrate them. And reality is that integration itself is not a new thing, right? It's been around for many, many years, right? Technology to do that, nothing new. The challenge has been that the data is just structured differently. So the feedback here is we need this data foundation. Best of breed cannot be buying random kind of tools, and we call that a best of breed strategy, right? We have to kind of think about it, and it comes back to we need to address our data challenge if we want to be prepared to not have, let's say, the challenges of the past, right? So I think this has now changed. We're definitely seeing it in the market, also driven by own kind of growth, but digitalization and automation, autonomous procurement have kind of pushed procurement to really tackle the data challenge. So I think it's great to see that, but it is critical to lay that foundation.
And it's no longer really a valid excuse, is it? Because if you keep delaying digital transformation because your data is poor, then 5 years down the line, you're still going to be at square one, but all of your competitors have gone and done something on it. Why do you think, particularly with best of breed solutions, why do you think they are especially good at supporting specific different workflows?
Well, it comes a little bit also to Pierre's point. Number one is who is starting them. But if you really think about it, it's quite logical. And as a software company, right, which this is what we're doing, if you have to focus on lots of things, it just makes it more difficult for you to be very good at it. So I think what you end up doing as a best of breed provider is, you're building a lot of knowledge. You're only solving this particular problem. With that, you're creating the community around that, right? The community of other practitioners, because ultimately they're giving you these ideas. But having that engagement with that community means that, we're just focused on this particular area. What comes with that is a lot of ideas, a lot of innovation, and also focused investment, right? Our investment doesn't have to be diluted by trying to be good at everything. We can just focus here. You're not being dragged into particular sales targets of another module, right? And I would argue we've all learned in kind of our careers and lives that you can't be good at everything, right? It's almost natural that we all end up focusing on something. So for me, it's super logical. Ability to focus enables you to become the best at something.
Yeah, the move away from the generalist to the specialist in so many different walks of life. Yeah, 100%. What about you, Pierre? What role does data play in procurement performance management?
Well, I will use that cliche that data is the new oil, and there's some truth to that. But there are a lot of different realities behind data. So at Angusta, we have some data, but it's more related to the activity and the performance of the buyers. So we're not extracting, we're not mining and enriching data. We're just looking at what the people are doing and what performance they are bringing. So that's very interesting. But one of the things that is maybe a bit unusual in the way we do that is, besides this data that we're generating, we also help our client consume data that comes from everywhere. So that would be typically, how do I understand who is my supplier? Okay, so I have some core information that would come from HICX on really the ID card of the supplier, but then I can look at how strong is my supplier from a financial standpoint. Dun & Bradstreet, for example, are they a good citizen? That would be CSR ratings from people like EcoVadis. That could be how exposed are they to cyber threat, people like Darkbeam. And what we believe fundamentally is that data should flow freely. And you have a different lenses through which you can look at a supplier. And the key is, how do I get a holistic view of that? And it's not because the CSR data comes from EcoVadis that I should be constrained to EcoVadis to see the data. We are big proponent of aggregating data from other sources, but also exposing our data to other sources. If you know something about a supplier, the channel in which you currently are shouldn't dictate what you can or cannot see. And that's the key. For us, the data should be available pretty much everywhere, especially if you pay for this. It's like Netflix on different screens. It should be the same for procurement and supplier data. Wherever you are, the data should be pervasive, and you should have that. So it's really, that's the way we think of data. Everybody produces data. Let's make it convenient and available from everywhere.
Awesome. Thanks, Pierre. So we're going to go now to do a quick poll. So for anyone in the audience, we're going to run a poll now just to see what your opinion is on the approach to best of breed solutions versus alternatives like a full suite. So the poll should now be up on your screen. Just click on the answer. We're going to give you about 30 seconds because we then need to move on. But just click on which one of those matches your opinion or your thoughts on this topic. And then we'll have a quick chat around the results and then move on to section 2 of the webinar. Interesting. Okay, let's give another few seconds. If you're on the call and you've maybe not seen this, just jump on and answer. That would be great. All righty. So it looks like the vast majority see a mix of both a suite and a best of breed solution, depending on the type of problem or the type of issue that they're looking to solve. Only one answer for 100% suite, a couple that don't have a clear-cut strategy, a couple saying best of breed, and then 3 saying best of breed considered but suite preferred. So there does seem to be this trend towards sort of mixing and matching. Gentlemen, what do you think of this? Initial thoughts?
First, I think the 30% of people who prefer suite or prefer the suite or have no clear-cut strategy, to be open enough to listen to the conversation. And Costas, let me tell you that we have a big stake here at showing them the light. So now it's very interesting. I mean, we're probably preaching the choir here, but it's interesting. And again, I honestly believe that the people who are not erring on the side of suite at the best of breed at the moment, will be talking to you and show you how good it is. But again, it's not either or, and I think that's the key. It's a bit, you need a strong backbone and best of breed working together. It's not you're in or you're out. Yeah, it's I guess we need to go in that direction.
And I think also, if you were to do this survey probably 5-6 years ago, it would be completely tilted, right? And I think there's a maturity and transition, and we are kind of at this transition at the moment, right? People have probably used a number of suites, and there is a place for the suite, right? That's why they're there. So I wouldn't argue against that. It's not they are our friends, right? I think Pierre would agree. It definitely isn't a one or the other, because they in themselves actually are best of breed at something. If you think of all the suites, they started with something, and then of course they all kind of cobbled other things together. So it's not surprising from that angle, right? The suite is going to play a mix in that. But I also think that in terms of a strategy, this will evolve, because I think it's also a procurement maturity. And what we have seen, at least with our customers, is the ones which are in industries which I would say have very mature procurement functions, have started to trend more and more to best of breed. Because if you think about it, as a procurement function matures, you have more acute needs, specialized needs, right? A very early on procurement function, you're grappling with the basics, right? Let's figure out where we're spending money, those kind of things. So it's not surprising, right, to see this kind of result.
It's not, but what do you think the challenges are around going best of breed? Is it coming from IT, or is it just a lack of willingness to do a proper RFI on what's out there? What's driving it?
Can we be blunt?
Yeah,
sure.
So let's go.
Golf course relationships.
So I was possibly, but I guess there's a bit of fear or reluctance or simply lack of education, and that's why I believe this kind of session is important. And again, some myths die hard, and the fact that best of breed is a nightmare in terms of integration, that's possibly the strongest myth of all. And again, we touched that in the beginning. The tech world has changed. And before that, with EDI, you needed to hire 150 man days just to connect to systems. We are now able to expose standard public APIs, and it's really a matter of days before you can start synchronizing two systems with core data. So that kind of thing is it's a bit infuriating to me, because it's a red herring issue, the integration. But the key point I say is that we need to understand that the biggest challenge to best of breed is people need to realize that big suites have failed them. I think it was Dr. Eloise Hepstein who said that this was a massive failure. She actually wrote 10 pages on that. And that's good. And they're very good at something, but they are at best average on other. So the CPO must first understand where they need excellent solution, expert solution, and then map the capabilities of their existing landscape to these needs. And if they have a very strong specific problem, then maybe they are right for a more best of breed approach on those specific topics. And obviously the goal is not to have 25 different solutions, but start with one topic that is close to your heart or close to your needs, and you might be surprised of the results. And you mentioned IT. Company culture might be something you need to have that conversation with IT, because ultimately that's one part where they should be the enabler and the support function. You know what you need, they should enable that, not tell you what to do.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Kind of
preaching to the choir, and that leads us. Sorry, Costas. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna maybe throw in there that there is also this conversation around, well, my users are going to be seeing different things, right? So, I don't want to have different solutions to be doing that. So I think that's also sometimes played in the back of people's minds, and they confuse this idea of what I call UI versus UX. And I think as consumers, we're all used to using best of breed tools, which will have actually different looking user interfaces, but they're very good at providing a good user experience. So I think that is something which is a hurdle in people's mind. They just confuse that different design is what drives the issue. And I think that is also wrong. We shouldn't worry about different design. Pick up your phone and look at all the different apps which you have on there. If you could argue that actually the mobile device is the best example of best of breed, right? So yeah, maybe throw that in there as well.
Yeah, and that brings us nicely on actually to section 2, which is how technology is changing the role of procurement. And I'm really, really glad that you touched on UI and UX, because I think to that point, would you rather have 5 solutions that look different but are very intuitive and easy to use and that will encourage user adoption, or would you rather have one big clunky elephant that nobody really likes using? I think, speaking to that point, that is very much the case. So Pierre, over to you. I mean, we're hearing more and more that the goal is to elevate the role of procurement within the organization, and having easy and intuitive to use technology is part of that, as Costas alluded to. But what in your experience is meant by elevating the role of procurement, and what steps really need to be taken to ensure that we achieve this?
Okay, so elevating the role of procurement is one of the things we hear very often in the world of procurement. The other is getting a seat at the board or at the table. They're seen as well, for me, they're one and the same. The thing is, how can we ensure that we as procurement leverage what we do best, which is understanding the needs of the organization and being the interface with the supply market, who will be able to do that. So elevating the role of procurement is, for me, ensuring that we can have this conversation with the market and with the business, and be that interface that will drive the cost out and drive the value in or up. It's balancing that very delicate equation. For me, elevating the role of procurement is knowing where to act, what lever to pull to get the most value. But the $1 million or $1 billion question is, okay, how do we do that? Because ultimately, when you think of that, there's a lot of procurement tech out there, but there are a lot of spreadsheets too. And I'm not sure this is the right way to do that. And ultimately, I believe that it shows 2 things. It shows that we still have some work to do in making our function more mature, more structured. What has always struck me is when you look at other functions, finance, HR, sales, there are some frameworks. There are not a million ways to do accounting. There's the gap in the US. You know how to handle your books. In the HR, there are paradigms. In sales, it's the same. We're talking every day to people about tracking benefits. God, we have more than 100 clients and there are more than 100 ways to track savings. That's just nuts. We should have a better way. And I believe that the only way to do that is to have that tough conversation, especially with finance, but more broadly with the business, on what is it that is expected from procurement. Because if we try to say, hey, we're elevating our role, well, we won't be going anywhere. So the way to do that is really to have transparency, alignment, and collaboration, because otherwise, well, we'll be not preaching the choir, but preaching in the desert. No one will pay attention. And if we don't get that baseline reputation, how can we have the harder conversations on managing the demand, managing innovation, managing all these things? It will be noise. So yeah, get your priorities straight, talk to finance, talk to the business, understand what they need, and understand how you can make a difference. And that will be a tough journey, but you'll get there, and it won't happen overnight, unfortunately. Structure, methodology, this is what will help us elevate the role of procurement.
Thanks, Pierre. And then, so going over to you then, Costas, do you think that a lot of the need to elevate our role within an organization has just been driven by the fact that we have suffered in the past from things like poor data, and if it is, then how can best of breed technology better foster cross-functional or cross-departmental collaboration?
Yeah, well, it's going to be a kind of roundabout way, but I think it does. And to Pierre's point, I find it crazy that so many large organizations, by the way, manage things on a spreadsheet. Excuse me, which is surprisingly the case. And I think even if it's a smart sheet, let's say, it's still not a scalable solution. But what I think best of breed has forced organizations to do actually is you have to lay this kind of data foundation. Now, this inherently, by the way, creates transparency, because Pierre also alluded to this, but oftentimes you don't have the same definitions, right? So the lack of transparency is we're not talking the same language. How many times do you argue the spend definition with finance, the savings definition, what is a supplier? All these things are not well defined, right? So what you end up having is, first of all, organizations are working with different definitions, right? Different view of a supplier. It could be a transacting location. It could be the quality department, which is working with a manufacturing location, right? Very different how AP works to the quality team for a manufacturing company, right? So what this is now causing is we're going to lay a foundation. It means we're going to have to talk. We're going to have to align. We're going to have to agree some definitions, and it ultimately helps you actually connect as a whole organization, right? So it is important to also see that these workflows are very cross-functional, right? I think if you look at things which span suppliers, it's very, very end-to-end. It's actually it's spanning every organization, right? So ultimately, you have to be able to work together as a whole organization to do that. And for us, I think procurement's role actually is being that enabler, that steward of facilitating the supplier experience. Because the way I see it is procurement buys goods and services. These are consumed internally by stakeholders, different types of things. But ultimately, value is created if you can steward correctly the overall end-to-end experience across many, many different processes, which are going to touch that. And what this is doing, I think, is giving procurement kind of a very different role if you're able to not just be insular to just procurement, but working end-to-end. And that's what I've seen a lot of mature functions move away from just the savings side, and they own end-to-end activities. This also gives you the ability to do more, but to add more value internally to your organization.
Which is a fantastic point, but then should that function or should that role even be called procurement? Because procurement does have kind of a negative connotation, doesn't it? Among many people, we're often seen as being the policeman, being the compliance police, or being a little bit like the Pope. We're the one that always says no. Do we need to rebrand ourselves? And if we're going to be looking after things like ESG and supply chain traceability, diversity, all of this extra stuff that kind of comes under our remit but isn't really officially our mandate right now. Do you think that's going to change? And if so, what do you think we should be called, or what should our role be?
Not an easy answer. I think, by the way, there is a need to rebrand, because it's no longer just about cost savings, and I see that in other functions. I draw a lot of parallels, by the way, from the sales and marketing side of the world, because I'm exposed to both in my day-to-day work. But obviously, with my customers, it's the other side of the coin. And if if I take a lot of analogies from their, sales and marketing, sure, are focused on revenue, but they also focus on customer experience. Why do they do that? Well, obviously they want to drive more revenue. So there is some other drivers behind there. So for me, procurement mandate has broadened dramatically. You mentioned these things: innovation, risk, sustainability, full kind of TCO value management, resilience. And I think when procurement thinks about it, to deliver on all these kind of things, we're heavily dependent on our suppliers. And the mandate has changed, and procurement is also driving different ways of fulfilling these kind of things, right? So if you think of resilience, well, people actually start to think of customer of choice. You may not make that connection, but actually they want to know that when the next COVID hits, am I going to be the customer that is prioritized, right, in a shortage? The other key thing which we see procurement now is looking to do is, how can I lower the cost to serve? Because we do a lot of surveys also of suppliers with our customers around the experience. One of the feedbacks was, you know what, I've got 40 people servicing your account management, not delivering the service. Reduce my cost to service you, and I can obviously bring back a cost saving. And there's a very interesting parallel. I don't remember, it was now many years ago, but GE used to sell these big kind of imaging devices, and they wanted to sell more of them. And they surveyed the hospital and said, buy more of this stuff. And the hospital said, well, we can only do 2 of these procedures a day. So obviously what did they do was, no problem. They hired an army of consultants, and they went to help the hospitals, improve their operations so they could do more of these, so they could sell more. And I think we're seeing more of this behavior of doing things outside your 4 walls. Okay, so the mandate is dramatically different, in my opinion. So just to come back to where it was now, can I offer up a name? I'm not going to try and do that. I think everyone's wanted to do it. They struggle to find a name, right? But it is very end-to-end. The key point, though, it's no longer just about savings.
Yeah, and I think, Pierre, just quickly, I'm conscious of the time, but I just wanted to loop back to you on this, because this speaks to a lot of what Pierre Angusta does as well, especially, measuring more holistic, cost reduction or cost management. How do we get finance into the boat on this one?
Start talking to them. You'd be surprised. A, they will listen, and B, they will tell you a story that you certainly don't have. I'm still amazed by the number of conversations we have where finance is not in the loop, or procurement believe that contribution should be measured in a certain way, and finance thinks otherwise, or simply doesn't care of some of the aspects. So have that alignment with finance, and then put in place the right governance is key. And I tend to believe, actually it's a bit more than that, it's a firm belief that if you manage to align with finance on the financial contribution, then you're in a much better place. That's the baseline. We expect procurement to have an impact on the cost. And it's not only by twisting a supplier's arm. There are smart ways to take some cost out. Costas hinted at that. But if you have bigger claims to value, you won't be heard if you haven't that basic part sorted out. Again, I always make the same comparison as Costas on the sales and marketing. Do you see a sales organization without a CRM to track the sales pipeline? None. 0. In Excel? Not a lot. Where are we with procurement? So get that part sorted out so that contribution tracking is no longer bins counting, but something that actually makes sense. And then you can start talking about the bigger agenda. I mean, we're seeing clients, we're helping clients on the diversity spend. spend with diverse suppliers. Because right now we know how much we spend and we have ambitions on how to do that, but we help them drive that objective, because in the middle of the year, you might end up realizing that you are nowhere near reaching your target. And so then it means you need to adjust the way you make your next negotiation, your next contract. And so if you have that kind of insight in your sourcing pipeline, then you can drive the activity to reach that objective. And that holds true for spend with diverse supplier, but also all the ESG related things. The company has an objective for CO2 reduction. How can procurement help? And you can help by starting to measure your impact. Well, we are not one cliche away from. Well, we're not too shy of one more cliche, but what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed.
Yeah.
It's the same. Money is pretty much under control. If we want to actually do something better, well, we need to start listening to the people who look after ESG, diversity, and all these things. So clearly, that's the future.
And now is the time. You hit on a good point. Now is the time to do it, isn't it? Because whereas 10 years ago it might have been cynically viewed as procurement just goes out and gets 3 quotes to prove that they're saving money or avoiding increases, now it's a lot more of a value discussion in a broader sense, isn't it? So I do agree with that if it's now or never, to quote the great philosopher Elvis Presley. So moving on to the final section, which is around innovation and future evolution. Pierre, I'll stay with you on this one. We mentioned that procurement is changing very rapidly in terms of what it's encompassing and what is sort of coming into our camp with regard to what we're being asked to look at now. So in your view, how do you think companies can prepare for this? What are you seeing them do already, and what should they be doing?
Again, it's clean your own house before you start getting out of the building. And you have, as procurement, you have to get out of your office and get out of the building. So make sure you leave a clean place. And that's exactly what we're aiming at Angusta. It's really organizing the sourcing pipeline, the activity of the buyer, and the relationship with finance and the business. If you don't reach alignment, well, again, you won't get anywhere. But once you have said that, and to be clear, and obviously I'm extremely biased here, you can't be doing that in a suite, or you can't be doing that in an Excel spreadsheet, right? There's no valid or no robust solution there. So once you have done that, start asking yourself, okay, what are the broader objectives of my company? Profitability should rank rather high. ESG is certainly everywhere in the conversations of the board. So make sure that you actually bring a solution to that. And again, that's having conversations. And once you actually understand what the core issues or the burning topics of your companies are, then you should start articulating what could be procurement's contribution to those objectives, and explain why you are in the best position to make a difference and serve those purposes. A few of our clients have told us at the beginning of the first lockdown, March 2020, so already 2 years ago, that they were very happy to have us, because at least they knew what they were working on. They had a view on how it could contribute to the bottom line, because here savings or cash were important. And the simple fact of being able to give visibility on what they were doing now, what would be the impact, and when we would get there. But also be able to say, hey, that's what we have in the pipeline for the next 6 months. They could have extremely meaningful conversation with the business to say, hey, okay, those 3, forget it, we don't need that. However, focus on those 2, because they will help us make a difference by the end of the year. So if you have this ability to project your contribution, to explain what you are doing, you will have a completely different relationship, and one of trust, one that will again help you go to the more value add activities, and that's what I hope for procurement sooner rather than later, because that's where we'll be able to thrive and to really demonstrate our potential for the company. So it's get ready, because that's where Pierre. That's how we get the credibility.
Yeah, it's a very, very comprehensive answer, Costas. I'm sure you've got something that you can add to this, especially around with the market evolving, how does that impact decisions that need to be taken today, especially when thinking of how a company is going to evolve their tech stack to deal with all of this and to cover it effectively?
Yeah, so no, market is definitely evolving. By the way, I love what Pierre and Angusta are doing because it's helping really professionalize the function, and I definitely want to say that overall as procurement, it just drives a different mindset. They're getting organized, and I think this is important. Also, showing kind of an evolution of procurement, right? The fact that they're now looking at how do I forecast my saving, how do I forecast innovation, how do I forecast all these things. In terms of broader evolution and the procure tech stack, we need to see that as it's a stack which is going to change, right? And companies grow, companies shrink, they do M&A, but ultimately you don't need the same stack all the time is how I see it. You're going to have some bread and butter things, but I think there was always too much focus, maybe because procurement sat under finance or other drivers. There was way too much focus on the transactional part of technology within procurement. It was not enough supplier focus, so not very end-to-end, which is where you ended up then with a lot of hodgepodge, I would say, internal kind of solutions. So, coming back to sort of the things which we've touched on, you need to lay a foundation. This is going to enable you to change your stack, right? That's the important thing. Without a foundation, it's very difficult to change the stack. But also, Pierre also mentioned this, the future is going to be far more open, right? And particularly up-and-coming players, Angusta, HICX, et cetera, they're all providing a lot of APIs, openness. I think you're going to see a lot more standardization being driven by upcoming best-of-breed providers, but also from the customers, right? And here I'm going to call it out, even across networks, right? I know the network is a great thing. The supplier does it once and never does it again. But the reality is there isn't one network, right? So unless there's one network, it is still, a pain in the backside to be doing these things. So even interoperability across networks, for me, is going to happen, right? Has to happen. Everyone is asking for it. So there will be a solution around this. And I go back to it. If we focus on the supplier experience, why did we eventually find this so important? For me, it's a design thinking. We think about the problem in a different way, right? And to give you an example, we might talk to a lot of procurement functions and they'll tell you, oh, the supplier experience is fine. I don't have a data problem. The reality is there's still an insular procurement function. Then you'll talk to the other departments. Oh, yes, but there's the quality team and finance and sustainability does something else, but we don't touch any of that stuff. That's other teams. But if you're looking at it from the supplier's perspective, you would immediately see, oh, wait, we're onboarding them into 10 systems and they go into 3 different networks and all of these things. So for me, it's a change of thinking to look at a problem in a different way to help you solve it in a more intelligent way. Sometimes I'm an engineer. I think that you have to look at the problem in the right way in order to solve it or even understand you have a problem. So I think the thinking and the evolution will go more towards this, but it will also be substantiated by more open ecosystem, more standardization, which will also lead to data being pervasive. I love the way you put that there, Pierre. So these are sort of my thoughts here.
Wonderful. Gentlemen, thank you both very much. We have run a few minutes over, but there were a couple of questions that came in during the webinar. So we will pick the questions up if anyone does have 5 minutes that they want to stay on for the Q&A. So if I just go to the first one, which came from Richard, and his question is, to what extent are best-of-breed providers explicitly collaborating with each other to enable customers to easily fit them together into an integrated solution? I don't know which one of you wants to take that, and we need to be quite brief, but it's difficult to answer in a minute or two. But either of you want to attempt it?
Well, I have a very short answer. The short answer is yes, right? We are. And maybe I'll let Pierre do a slightly longer one.
I have a slightly longer one and slightly tongue-in-cheek, to be honest. The good ones, yes. I mean, we've been talking for many years with HICX, and you can do that. We have integration with people who have open APIs and they don't want to talk to us, and no problem. But we never go anywhere near as far as with people we can collaborate with. And so it's honestly an investment from us, and Costas is doing this at HICX. I'm doing this at Angusta. We invest a lot of time in talking to our partners, understanding what success looks like in their platform, and ensuring that we align on that. Because ultimately, if it's just poorly tied solutions, it will actually destroy value, and this will destroy the best of breed movement, because that will be a promise we cannot fulfill, and so that would be bad. So yeah, we definitely talk a lot with the other provider. That's the only way to make meaningful integrations.
And the integrations that you have, it's not just on master data, is it? It encompasses a whole range of third-party solutions providers beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. The master data is fine because you need to have a common ground for talking with the other solution. But we integrate with spend visibility solution that will build into, that will dump opportunities in the pipeline. We integrate with e-sourcing solution to actually execute on an initiative, and we can integrate with HICX to ensure that we have a seamless flow of data and activities between the solutions. So clearly, it's not only master data.
Okay, and then the final question, which was from Damien. What do you think about rebranding procurement into supply chain to avoid the stereotypical perception by other functions? Before I ask you that, and I'll go to you, Costas, on this one, but I certainly see a trend, certainly among manufacturing businesses, for procurement to be reporting into supply chain now rather than finance. So my personal opinion, I think that is something that is in evolution, even if it's not been officially rebranded as such. But curious to hear your thoughts, Costas, as well.
Again, no easy answer for this one. I think this makes sense if you're in a manufacturing business. I would also agree with you that for procurement to be under supply chain makes more sense. Now, my view, to be honest, and again, Pierre alluded to this, so it's good we have some similar thinking. For me, procurement is more like marketing, right? And sales and marketing. It's about supply markets in a way. Now, obviously, the interactions are different, but I see more parallels there. I don't have a good name for it, but ultimately, what are you doing is you're all about the supply markets, right? And there are supply markets ultimately, and that's what the procurement function is helping to work with and to optimize. Supply chain, for those also that know a bit better, it covers a lot of other things, right? Maybe it's good for that all to be under one umbrella. I don't know.
One of the CPO
at our thank you,
the CPO at one of our clients told us that the future of procurement is actually managing strategic resources, and so that's possibly something we'll also gravitate towards. Is okay. Strategic resources management. I don't know if it's if it's much more glamorous than procurement, but when we talked about being the customer of choice, it's also about that. If you want to trade, it will no longer be about the price, but also the relationship and the projects you can build together. So yeah.
Okay, so gentlemen, thank you very much for joining this webinar today in this fireside chat. I hope everyone that's attended has got some value from it and has given them food for thought around best of breed versus suites and what the future might indeed look like as we go into what's proving to be another difficult year in the procurement and supply chain space. So all the best, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and speak to you soon. And thank you, Pierre and Costas, for being such great panelists.
Thanks for having us, James. Cheers. Have a good evening. Bye.